Hey everyone, what's up? Yeah, it's surprising, isn't it? It's Tuesday, September 25th, 2018. It is 7:47 p.m. As I'm doing this. Of course, I did work today, which you probably saw with my quick channel update video. I don't think you really see it, but yeah, I have a bit of coffee in there, so need to have something while I do this, because usually I'd be laying right down there right about now, just getting comfortable, keeping an eye on this computer because, as I've mentioned before, the Windows 10 likes to try to surprise us with updates, if you know what I mean. Like, oh, here's an update or something, because it constantly likes to load. And when it loads, it's basically you get that load light going on. You're thinking, what's going on? And sometimes it's just, it's checking for viruses. It's doing a Windows Defender summary, or, just checking, making sure nothing's affected. But sometimes you hear like a little click at times, and it makes you curious as to if it makes you curious, as if maybe it's letting you know, hey, it's update time. And there are times that it does do that. So that's why, I constantly go to the Windows icon right over here and check by going to the power icon, to the power button, clicking on it and seeing if it's saying update or something like that. I'm also kind of letting you guys know that I do apologize if there's a lag or an abrupt interruption, because even if it's very brief, because as I've said before, I have the XB6 Xfinity modem, and it seems that for some odd reason, when other people like to connect to the internet, despite the fact that I have mine connected via Ethernet cable, the internet gets knocked out. It gets basically knocked out for a brief moment, for like very microscopic moment, but it gets knocked out to the point that when I go onto a internet page, it'll say you're not connected, or da da da, and then when you reset, or it automatically resets or something. So yeah, I do apologize if that happens. But I'm here actually to do this video that I wanted to do during lunch. I was actually planning to do it with my with this. I was actually planning to do with this, but I kept kind of restarting because I was fumbling over my words. And I just decided, you know what, if I'm going to talk about this, if I got to talk about this, I might as well do it live in front of you guys, and give you my thoughts on what I'm discussing here. Oops, that's not exactly what I wanted right there. Hold on for a sec. Let's go to links here. There we go. Yeah, but basically the title of this video, this live stream that you could see, is Fame and Misfortune. Why did Hasbro / the MLP Creative staff use it the way they did? And basically what I say here, basically what I've said in the description, I pretty much stick by, and, it's no secret to anybody by now. It's no real secret whatsoever that a lot of fans like myself have pretty much given our thoughts and opinions on Fame and Misfortune. As a matter of fact, according to what I said here in my description box, I'm here to give my opinions on why Hasbro and the MLP Creative staff used this episode from last season, season 7, to negatively target the analysis community of its overall fan base that helped make the show what it is today. And, like I said, a lot of us have talked about, have given our thoughts on the episode and how we feel about it. And quite honestly, it is, as Josh Scorcher put it, a very polarizing, if not controversial episode. Because basically, here you have, um, here you have, this creative staff who allowed the same writer, M.A. Larson, excuse me there, but allowed the same writer, M.A. Larson, to write this episode just as he wrote the 100th episode back in season 5, Slice of Life. And that episode was basically like a thank you to the fan base for being as weird and unique and supportive of the show as they were. But with that said, like I said, with that said though, you take the same writer like M.A. Larson, you allow him to do this episode, which is also about the fans, but his intentions are to go in another direction to kind of reveal that there is someone or some pony else behind what's going on. And instead of going in the direction that, let's be honest, would have probably given you a more positive response towards the episode and less negativity and less, and basically, make the episode less polarizing and less controversial. You know, if you would have gone in that direction, it would have probably been for the better. You know, but what I'm saying, I'm sorry if I'm fumbling on my words here, kind of thinking about what I'm trying to think about what I'm saying, and I'm also linking the live stream to a lot of places here, so I do apologize if I'm a little distracted and I lose track a little bit. But basically, like I said, why, you allow the same guy that wrote that episode to write this, who, like I said, had the intentions of going in one direction and revealing, that there's someone or some pony or some, creature else. And that was my dog. She's all right. She's just, biting at the fleas. But like I said, you allow him to write this episode, and his idea is to go in a direction that basically reveals that there's someone else, some pony else, some creature else behind what's going on. And instead of doing that, which, like I was trying to say, would have made your episode less polarizing, less controversial, and probably more acceptable by the fan base, instead you decide to go in a direction where you're taking a lot of the background characters or semi-major characters and you're positioning them as being representations of the fans themselves, if not most of all, the analysis community. And why did you do that? Why would you go and do that? And I thought about this while I was trying to do an actual audio recording earlier today as to why they would do this. Why Hasbro would do this even at this time. And, it kind of suddenly hit me a little bit that I think the reason they did it, and I brought this up several times I was trying to do the audio, I think the reason they did it is because some fans or some members of the analysis community critiqued and thumbed down a decision that they made for the direction of an episode, and mostly the direction maybe of some of the characters. And whatever it was, Hasbro and the executives behind the show, those in charge of the show, decided that what, they had enough and that they needed to get back at the fans somehow. I mean, here's what's funny. Fame and Misfortune is not the only episode that kind of showed the fan base in a negative light. Kind of. Once Upon a Zeppelin did the same thing. Not as badly as this, but it still did the same thing. And that's why fans were kind of, polarized about it. They're like, yeah, it's a good episode, but why would you use an episode like Once Upon a Zeppelin, which didn't need to go, which honestly was good on its own and didn't need to go in this direction that you had to go in, with a little bit of a jab at the fans? Why would you use it to do that? Why would you use a small portion of Once Upon a Zeppelin, which is a Twilight and family episode? Why would you do that just to take another jab at the fan base? And again, my theory, my theory on the whole situation is, honestly, my theory on the whole situation is, like I said, I think something happened about a couple of seasons ago where they got critiqued, probably negatively, by a lot of the members of the analysis community on something that they did. And they just probably had a meeting and said, hey, enough's enough. We got to do something. We got to put our foot down. And I guess when M.A. Larson came up with the idea to write this episode, which is Fame and Misfortune, and he wanted to go in the direction that he wanted to, that's probably the opening they were looking for. And that's why, like he said in his panels, they decided to override him and say, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to do this. And when one looks at it, when one overall looks at what they did here, you have to ask, why so late in the series would you decide to finally do this? You had an opportunity, in season 6, perhaps, to do a sequel to Slice of Life. You could have done maybe the 125th episode or 110th episode or whatever you want to call it. You could have done an episode earlier on or in the midway portion of season 6 as a bit of a follow-up to what was going on in Slice of Life, and you could have done it then. Why wait so long till you got to the latter part of season 7 to do this? Basically, towards the latter half of the third to last season, potentially, and I say that potentially because we don't know if season 9 is the last season or it isn't. But why would you wait to get to the latter half of the third to last season to address this? Don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong or anything. The episode, everybody has agreed, the episode is good. The episode has a positive, vibe to it. It's funny. It has its comedic moments. But all those positives that I just mentioned there get overshadowed due to the fact that, it gets overshadowed due to the fact that what you get for a majority of the episode, especially when you get to certain parts, is the creative staff behind the series and at Hasbro basically saying, screw you guys. We appreciate the support, but screw you and your criticism. And I think what Josh Scorcher pointed out, and even anybody that's reviewed this episode has pointed this out in some way, from Watchful Pony to Lightning Bliss to Silver Quill to many others. Even Lily Orchard has talked about this in their unique and her unique way. But basically, when you look at Fame and Misfortune, when you look at it again, I think Josh Scorcher said it best. I think he said it best. The ending, because if you think, because this is what he pointed out, if you think basically that after singing "We're Not Flawless," and that's still not getting through to the skulls of the ponies that were representing the fans, and that basically, as Josh pointed out, the way the main six just goes back in the castle and shuts the door because, hey, there's no reasoning with these guys. You know, as he put it, if you think that's bad, if you think that's rock bottom, then the ending with Starlight bringing in the G4 versions of Tura Lura and Coconut Cream, who originally debuted in G3, if you think bringing them in, if you think what happened before, hold on for a sec. There we go. But basically, if you think what happened, there, like I was saying, with basically, um, basically, you know, the townsfolk, aka the fans, not being reasonable even after a song that basically explains, hey, these characters are imperfect. These characters, are not as, perfect as you say they are, or not as this and that as you say they are. And when one looks at that, what I'm trying to get at is, okay, what I'm trying to get, and I'm sorry, I am a little tired, I will admit that. But what I'm trying to get at is, after Josh pointed that out, how basically even after a song, it was basically you had the main six go back in the castle because, them representing the show, them in the journal representing the show, and basically saying that, yeah, there's no reasoning with these people, with these ponies, these fans. Josh basically pointed out that if we thought that was rock bottom, the ending where Starlight brought in Tura Lura and Coconut Cream went even further down. Because basically, what Hasbro was trying to say with them coming out and saying they got what the journal was talking about, it's their way, is basically Hasbro's way of saying, get it, guys? Get it? This is who the show was targeted at originally, and mostly is targeted at young kids, young girls, young boys. Hey, young boys, young girls, young kids who don't care about characterization, who don't care about things staying in within continuity, who don't care and focus on a character developing, personality wise, or furtherly developing the personality. Basically, when that scene came up, and that was and basically the way Josh described it, that was being their way of saying, hey, the show is not really for you guys. It's like you can enjoy the show, but you got to remember its original targeted audience and who the show is meant to be targeted towards. So if you remember that, we won't have basically when one looks at Fame and Misfortune from last year, you go from top to bottom with it. It's basically, even at the end, it's basically Hasbro saying, look, you can enjoy the show, but remember, it's meant for little kids only. It's originally meant for little kids. So if you can remember that and not try to tear apart, oh, what needs to be improved on, what needs to be developed, this character needs this character needs that, we'll be on good terms, and we won't have to do this kind of thing. We won't have to use an episode to basically try to knock it upside your skulls that this is meant for young kids, not adults. And I think everybody that's talked about this episode pretty much has all said the same thing. You cannot, how do I put this? You cannot force somebody to like something the way you want to like it. There's a reason we have what's known as free speech. Some people don't believe we really do anymore, but we do. But the point is, there's a reason we have free speech. The reason being is because we're allowed to say what we want when we want, without any real consequence. You know, okay, there might be a consequence depending on the environment or the area you're in, but still, you are entitled to free speech, to say what's on your mind, and if nobody agrees with it, that's fine. You know, we have the freedom to say and do what we want. Whether people like it or they don't, and whether it's right or sometimes it's very wrong, and we've kind of seen that, you know, in the past few years. You know, despite how you look at it, we live in a country where we have the freedom to say and do what we want and be creative and give criticism where criticism is due. That's what we are allowed to do. And for Hasbro to basically, as Josh put it, at the end with Starlight, who I am a fan of, everybody loves a majority of the fans have really started to warm up, if not start to really love Starlight. But to have someone or some pony like Starlight bring in these two young filly characters from the beginning of the episode to emphasize they're the only ones that get it, thus only the kids would understand the show and accept the show for what it is. You know, for Hasbro to come out and say that, and to basically, in their own way, as I just said, for them to try to tell us, look, if you remember what who the show is originally targeted at, we'll be okay, and we won't have to go this route. You can't do that. You can't do that. I mean, let me ask you this: how many times have the show producers of The Walking Dead, Game of Thrones, you know, The Flash, Green Arrow, Riverdale, Supergirl, you name it, how many times have the producers taken any of those episodes in the several seasons they've been on and used it to bash the fans and try to send the message of, okay, kids, you see these adults here? You see these adults here? This is who the show's meant for. You see these teenagers here? This is who the show's meant for, not for you. Not once have I ever heard of any of those shows doing that, or any of the show creative staff, or any of those shows creative staff doing that. They never had a reason because they support all kinds of fans. And you know what? When it comes to young kids or young children watching The Walking Dead, Game of Thrones, Riverdale, Arrow, Flash, Supergirl, that's up to the parents, not to the creators. And the point I'm trying to get at here is this. When one looks at Fame and Misfortune, the reason Hasbro did this or used this episode to go in the direction they did to negatively bash the fan base is because basically they're trying to send a message that's not the right kind of message. Look, the episode, as I mentioned, a lot of people will say this, it had its funny moments. It had its decent moments. It overall was a decent episode. It basically follows that saying of it's so good that it's bad. But in this case, the episode is decent, but it's decent enough to, what was the saying? It's so bad that it's good. That's what I'm looking for. That basically it's a good episode, but it's so bad due to the fact that it's negatively bashing an audience that helps support and make the show what it is today. I think what Hasbro and the creative staff behind the show was forgetting is that if it wasn't for the fans, there wouldn't be an MLP 2017 movie. Do you think Lauren Faust, when she was brought in to make the show a reality, her plans originally was to probably aim for a theatrical release? Maybe that's what her plans were. But did she expect the show to take off the way it did? Not really. But Lauren Faust is the kind that would have accepted it. She would have accepted it. She would have embraced the fans, no matter what their age demographic was, of supporting the show and making it what it is today. I'm guessing Lauren Faust probably looked at this episode and realized what was going on and was probably shaking her head in shame, thinking, why would you do this? Now, again, I don't know if the creative staff behind the show and at Hasbro had some whatever ants they had up their pants when they decided to do this. But you cannot. But here's the thing. You shouldn't use something. How do I put this? You shouldn't use something. Okay. Let me. What I'm saying is you shouldn't use something like an episode. You shouldn't throw away a decently good episode or switch around someone's original idea for that episode, all because you want to all because you see an opportunity to get back at the fans, mostly the analysis community, for basically criticizing and thumbing down some of the decisions you have made. I mean, the fact that you point out some things that have been years old, and yeah, some members of the fan base and community still find those decisions awkward or not the best decisions to make. Yeah, a lot of fans still feel that Alicorn Twilight was not the best decision you made, and some are hoping maybe there's a way they'll revert it. There's a lot of things. Fans do question Fluttershy's, growth in character at sometimes as to why she's not always assertive. Why she doesn't just be as assertive as she should be. And that's my dog. She's just feeling ornery right now. Why don't, why doesn't this, basically some of the arguments you're pointing out in that episode are current, but have also been discussed in the past and accepted. And the fact that you even use the episode to target certain members of the analysis community. Lily Pete, if you will, when they did their, 7 minutes in a minute edition on Fame and Misfortune, how they pointed out that one of the ponies who had a different cutie mark before this had a glass half full cutie mark, thus targeting her, Lily Pete, for saying what she did. Or what about doing this "We're Not Flawless" song, and the fact that you had in Pinky's moment when Pinky sang her part of the song, you had two Pinkies, one sitting down doing something like a therapy with Pinky writing down, thus it's a jab at Dr. Wolf. Why would you do that? Why would you go out and do that if, in a sense, you're not using this episode as an opportunity to try to shut the fan base up and make them realize that, hey, this is a show meant for little kids and that you shouldn't criticize a show meant for little kids? Here's the thing. If your original plan, Hasbro, was to make this show mostly for little kids, little girls, if that was the plan, you should have let Lauren Faust know. Lauren Faust. you know that she'll want to create something that appeals to all families, to families of all ages, to folks of all ages, people of all ages, to, you know, sit back and enjoy, to watch and enjoy. You know, you can't expect someone like her not to know. And what I'm saying is, you can't expect someone like her not to know that your original intentions is to make this more about the young kids and have that be the main target and nothing else. If you would have just, here's the thing, Hasbro, if you would have communicated better, and I like the fact that Josh used this clip, I think from an HBO show or something like that. If you would have communicated better to Lauren Faust when you brought her in, and said, look, we want you to make the show, but we want you to make sure the show is targeted at little girls and make sure that's the only targeted audience we get, you know, maybe you wouldn't have to worry about this. But then again, and that's my dog again, she's feeling ornery a little bit. But then again, like I said, you wouldn't have the phenomenon you would have right now, would you? You wouldn't have the lore that you got now for this rendition of the franchise. You wouldn't have the world expanding, the character developing, or any of that. You wouldn't have these numerous conventions that, you know, celebrate the show and what it's done if it wasn't for your fan base. You wouldn't. And that's why, ladies and gentlemen, when one looks at Fame and Misfortune, the reason it was created the way it was, the reason they differed from going in the direction that M.A. Larson wanted to go in, and instead went in a different direction to where it was basically a bashing of the fans, is because they were trying to send the message to the fans that, again, as Josh Scorcher pointed out in his review, at the end, when Starlight brought in Coconut Cream and Turarula, when she brought them in, and basically they're the ones that basically said that they understood what the journal was saying to them, you know, that right there is the message that Hasbro was trying to send out. That we, as adult fans, as bronies, Pegasisters, members of the Rift Cafe, the overall analysis community, if we just learn to remember and understand this is meant for young kids, and young kids don't take character development, world expanding, continuity, and all that too seriously, or don't even pay attention to it, because all they're focused on is the characters on the show and what character or whatever item could be the next merchandise or toy they can end up getting or begging the parents to get. You know, if we just remember that, we won't have to worry about something like this happening. We won't have to worry about Hasbro deciding to take an episode and use it to bash us. And that we have to remember that kids don't care about a show, like I said, that should remember its continuity. Remember its developing of certain characters and world expanding, and that we shouldn't basically overall worry about criticizing a show meant for young kids. But again, I get back to what I was saying. If that's the case, why didn't they tell Lauren Faust that when they brought her on board to create the show? Why didn't they take her aside and communicate better and say, look, we want you to do this, but we want you to make sure it's specifically targeted towards this audience and nothing more. So in the end, guys, when one looks at it, when one overall looks at it, basically the episode, the message that Hasbro was trying to send is exactly that. That we, as adult fans, as the bronies, the Pegasisters, what have you, have to remember that the original targeted audience for this show was young kids. And if we remember that, we'll all be good. And we also have to remember that young kids don't care about, like I said, all the things that I mentioned, character development, characterization, stuff like that. And all they care about is the ponies and the characters on the screen. And what toys and whatever merchandise they can end up getting or begging the parents to get them in the future. But like I said, as Josh Scorcher pointed out, Hasbro, you cannot do that. Because if it wasn't for this fan base, you wouldn't have the phenomenon you have now. You wouldn't have Netflix working out a deal with you somehow to keep the show on their streaming service. You wouldn't have Hulu wanting to have the first rights to air the 2017 movie on their streaming service. So overall, folks, when one looks at it, excuse me, and that was my dog. Again, she's feeling ornery. But again, folks, when one looks at it, when one overall looks at it, Hasbro's message here, as much as we disagree with it, and we have a right to, as much as we may not like the fact that they use this episode to target us, the fans, and also, and how we criticize, the message that they tried to send here was is to remember who the original audience this show is meant for, and not to criticize something that young kids wouldn't be criticizing themselves, because they wouldn't. And that's my dog. She's just feeling ornery. So, overall, folks, that's pretty much all I'm going to say. I do apologize if I rambled a little bit, and I do apologize for some of the distractions. But yeah, basically, though, that's all I have to say. Basically, when one looks at Fame and Misfortune, that was Hasbro's intention. The reason they did it, the reason they decided to use this episode to negatively bash the fan base at that time, was because they're trying to send that message. But guess what? I think Hasbro has realized it didn't work. It didn't work, and stuff like that won't work. Because, like Josh said, you can't control what people like and dislike, or how they view things, or how they want to criticize them. So, that's all I'm going to say, guys. Let me know what you all think down below. Comment if you like. I'd like to hear from you all. It looks like I'm getting quite an audience here already. I don't know if I could check on my phone real quickly before I get on here. So, but yeah, like I said, it's just, it's just when you look at Fame and Misfortune, yeah, overall, it's a good episode. It has some comedy in it. It has decent comedy, and stuff like that. It has all that. It has, what you like in an MLP episode, especially one based or targeted towards the fans. But what makes it, again, so polarizing and stuff is the fact that it's targeting the fans in a negative way. It's basically saying, look, you have to, because again, I think that's why Hasbro did this. That they're trying to send the message of, hey, this show is meant for young kids, so you shouldn't have to worry about criticizing it or worrying about whether a character, continues their development or progression in development or stuff like that, or a continuity is acknowledged, stuff like that. So, yeah, overall, hopefully we don't get another episode like Fame and Misfortune, because I think basically Hasbro's attempt to kind of basically, quill the audience, kind of subdue the audience and make them, kind of think along the lines that they do, it failed. And I think they need to realize that. So that's all I'm going to say, guys, for now. Let me know what you all think down below. Thank you all for watching. I really appreciate it. And I will talk to you all later.